On day 24, we'll be looking around downtown Boston. We'll leave our hotel and drive to Paul Revere's house and Bunker Hill Monument to look at them, take the Old Town Trolley tour around the city, go back to the harbor and take the harbor cruise, and then head back to our hotel for the night. It's going to be a cloudy day, but not any rain while we're out today, so that's going to be good. We left earlier so we can go see some sights before we catch the Old Town Trolley, and we head back through the Big Dig again. We get off in the middle of Boston, and we're heading to the old downtown area to look at some of the sights before we catch the big bus trolley. Our first stop is going to be Paul Revere's house. We're not going to be able to go inside Paul Revere's house. It's not open yet. But looking on the outside, he was a silversmith, a goldsmith, a coppersmith, a bell maker, a bell ringer, and a dentist. He had 8 children by his first wife and 8 more children by his second wife. In 29 years, he had 16 children to take care of. No wonder he worked so much. His house is located in a downtown area, and it hasn't changed since he lived here. This is the way it looked when he was here. We're next headed to another site that's associated with Paul Revere, the Old North Church. This is where the lanterns were hung, 2 if by sea, 1 if by land. It's an active church, and so today is Sunday, and it's not open for touring. It has worship services during the day. And up there is where the lanterns were hung. We're next headed across the river to Charlestown. This is where the famous Battle of Bunker Hill was fought, although it was fought really on Breed's Hill, and Bunker Hill was just the objective. The British lost over half of their soldiers assaulting this site, and only after the Americans ran out of ammunition were they able to take the site. They learned a lesson that day about assaulting Americans. Colonel William Prescott was commander of the American forces. It was the hill they protected. Now it's time to head back into Boston over the river, across the Leonard P. Zimpkin Bridge. This bridge looks as it does because they're trying to model the sails that are on the Uss Constitution nearby.
Your destination is on the right.
Once downtown, we pull into the parking garage. We'll be parked the rest of the day and riding on the Old Town Trolley. This is the route that the Old Town Trolley will take. We'll get off in 3 places: at 5 and see this area, at 18 and see this area of the city, and then back at 1 again to look around the harbor and take a harbor cruise. Let's get started. Here comes our trolley now. We'll be having several bus drivers as we go, since we get on and off several times.
Clang, clang, clang with the trolley. Ding, ding, ding with the bell. Sing, sing, sing like my heartstrings. From the moment I saw it, I fell.
Alright, ding, ding, ding with the bells. Pretty much, we're going to do that for the whole day. We're going to have trolleys every 10-15 minutes, starting here, stop number 1. So make plans to enjoy the day, make the priority, since it's a dry day and have great weather, to explore the city of Boston. And I mean going to museums, going to many of the attractions along the way. Make sure you do that, because if you stay long or a little longer in Boston town...
Here we see the Old North Church again, a 197-foot tall steeple. We saw who drove by it just earlier today. And now it's time to cross back over the bridge into Charlestown, where we were earlier. We're going to be stopping at the USS Constitution in Charlestown Navy Yard. This is one of the more famous ships in the United States, and we'll look at it more closely on our harbor tour. After this stop and looking at the Bunker Hill Monument, we'll be crossing the Charles River again and looking at the locks there that are used to get the ships up and down through the dam. And over there, that's TD Garden. That's where the Boston Celtics and the Boston Bruins play.
Well, you are scoring this not last minute, but the winning goal on the extra time. So if you are into sports, especially hockey, you can see the statue on the right. Bobby, you are flying into the air after you scored this winning goal on the extra time. That was one of the most iconic goals of NHL history. You gotta find the 6 blessed hours. Since it's a little chilly, you gotta see the steam coming from the ground. This is the Holocaust Memorial, and each one of the 6 blessed owls will be representing one of the 6 major concentration camps, and the steam on the ground will be representing the chimneys of these camps, where we had over 6 million victims at the Holocaust. Over 6 million people that sadly were killed just because they were different. They had different religion, different gender, different race. The Holocaust was one of the saddest parts of humanity in Boston. This is Federal Hall on your left, your brick building with the golden dome. Second floor was called the Cradle of Liberty, where the Sons of Liberty used to gather and plan the American Revolution. It could be a little
Now we
longer
come to our get-off point at the Old State House built in 1713. We're going to be exploring on foot here some, and as you can see, it's kind of nestled in among skyscrapers. That balcony up there is where the Declaration of Independence was read from. And down below there's a circle on the ground. This is where the Boston Massacre happened in March 5th, 1770. We're going to be following the Freedom Trail, these markers on the ground that take you to various historical sites around Boston. Our first stop is going to be the Granery Burying Grounds. As you can see from these videos, it's a very small cemetery, but it has a whole lot of famous people in it. Let's look around for a while. We'll be looking around the cemetery counterclockwise. First we come to the grave of the Boston Massacre victims. And next to them is Samuel Adams' grave, one of the founding fathers of our nation. Then we come to a person you probably haven't heard of, Robert Treat Paine. He's one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. The grave of Benjamin Franklin's parents are next. And then not too far from them is a person who was known as Mother Goose, Mary Goose. In the center back we come to the monument for Paul Revere and also to his grave here. Next we come to somebody you haven't heard of, Peter Faneuil. He built that hall we looked at a little bit earlier where the Patriots met. Next we come to John Hancock, one of the founders of our nation. And on around we come to James Otis. You haven't probably heard of him, but he was one of the great thinkers who inspired Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson with their ideas. And now we move over to the Old South Meeting House. The Patriots moved here when the Faneuil Hall filled up for their meeting that led to the Boston Tea Party. And out front is a memorial to the Irish immigrants. Over 37,000 came in one year in 1837 due to the famine. And now let's go inside and look around a little bit. As you can see, they had boxes that you rented, and that was yours. Nobody else sat in them. And around the outside, they have various displays of dissidents who have fought for freedom in various settings around the world. They're very proud of their dissident history, and this is where the people left for the Boston Tea Party. And now we go back to the old State House, which is now open. It's a museum, and upstairs is the council chamber from 1764, where the governor's council met. Out there, that's where they stood to read the Declaration of Independence to all the people for the first time. And that circle down there, that's where the Boston Massacre happened. Boston was a center of shipping around the world for many years. The Stamp Act was what started off and caused the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Massacre meant the soldiers had to leave town because of the citizens. And this building has been used for many different purposes.
JFK. John Fitzgerald Kennedy had 122 Bowdoin Street as his mailing address until he was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. But he built West Church, and it was built in 1806. Prior to that, there was a wooden church that was built in 1737, but the British soldiers thought that colonials might be using it like the Old North Church with the lanterns as a way of communicating their movements. So they tore it to the ground. They had a big old bonfire where I'm told they roasted s'mores and they had crumpets, whatever those are. And then in 1806, they built it out of brick. Then for a period of time during the last century, 1900s, they had a voting booth downstairs as part of Boston Public Library, and JFK went inside, voted for himself before becoming president. His wife Jackie also went inside and voted. I assume around the corner to our right, we're going to see a large stone building with bars on the windows. It is the Liberty Hotel today, but those bars tell the story of what it was before, back when it was the Charles Street Jail there to our right. They're real proud of the fact that they're an old jailhouse. They have a bar they call the Clink, a nightclub called Alibi. They use their old jail cells as booths for their guests. As because all the exterior shots were done here in Boston, which means yes, those are the actual staircases from the opening right there. But all the interior shots were done on a Hollywood movie set. So when you go downstairs, you find yourself in the Bullen Beach Pub, which is what Cheers is modeled after. But then when you go upstairs, you'll find yourself on a replica set bar where everybody knows your name, as long as your name is Norm. Yeah. And for the one or two, we just entered into our next section of Boston. This is called the Back Bay. Back Bay gets its name because at one point it was the bay in the back of Boston. Story, I gotta take you back 203 years ago. In 1818, when they built what was called the Mill Dam as a way to harness the power of the water in the area. What they did not know building the dam was that people were throwing their trash in this area. Just kind of letting the Atlantic Ocean take it out with the tide. So when they built the dam, it cut off that twice daily tidal flow from the Atlantic and created a giant stinking swamp. In order to combat that, they underwent a 50-year-long project where 35-car railroad trains came every 45 minutes, 24 hours a day like clockwork for 50 years to fill in the Back Bay. When they were done, Boston would never be the same again. When Boston was founded in 1630, it was only 1.2 square miles of land. But nowadays, due in part to these landfill projects, it's up to 48.5 square miles. So 1.2 to 48.5 square miles. On either side of us are brownstone mansions. These all originally started out as single-family homes, although most of them now are divided into apartments and condominiums. Some are still single-family homes. The ones on the right more expensive than the ones on the left. The ones on the right have a great view of the Charles River. Right out there. Whereas the ones on the left, they have a great view of the ones on the right. If you're trying to figure out a price range for what one of these houses could go, a single-family home on Lincoln Street, one sold not too long ago for $10 million. From the left, you'll see a building with American flags, Boston Public Library, largest free-letting library in North America with over 30 million items to go check out. Just beyond it, the building with the green spires is the new Old Town Church, built in the 1890s, just like another church.
Trinity Church, an Episcopal church built in Back Bay in 1890s, has a very unique style for a church. And now we passed Edgar Allan Poe and his Raven statue.
Over to our right is Boston Common, country's oldest public park, set aside as public land in 1634, and since its beginning it's had many laws attached to it. Back in the 1600s they had laws like no dancing in public, no holding hands in public, no listening to music in public. Nowadays we have laws like the Massachusetts blue laws. Still technically illegal, but we tend not to follow them. Like one that those folks are breaking right now. It says no crossing Boston Common without carrying a shotgun for fear of bears. New State House. And although we call it that, it's not new. It's newer than the old State House. The old State House was built in 1713 and the new one 1797. So not even 100 years later. Its gold dome is just gold leafing around a copper dome. Copper put in by Paul Revere and Sons to give you an idea how new it actually is. Speaking of some not so little red brick church is the Old South Meeting House. One of the most iconic sites for American Revolutionary history you'll see in Boston today. That was just Samuel Adams stood up in front of the crowd and addressed them saying these famous words.
There is nothing more a meeting can do to save this country.
Isn't it great that Old Town Trolley was there to record it for you too? Nothing more a meeting can do to save this country. What that was actually a secret code message to the Sons of Liberty waiting outside of the church, letting them know, hey guys, it's now time to go march on down to Griffin's Wharf. Where the night before, 3 ships had pulled into port. You had the Eleanor, the Dartmouth, and the Brig Beaver. And they were looking to unload over 300 crates of tea the next morning with a new tea tax stamped upon it.
You like.
But now on to the business at hand. We have leading this meeting today a most ardent patron, a leader amongst the Sons of Liberty, Mr. Samuel Adams.
Well met, my friends. Although I do wish we were meeting under kinder circumstances. We've gathered here today to discuss yet another crisis forced upon us by Parliament, supposedly on behalf of our monarch, King George III. Out there in Boston Harbor there are 3 ships, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Brig Beaver, and their holds are bursting with 340 crates of East India Company tea. Now, under the law, each of these vessels has 20 days to unload its cargo and pay the duties or taxes owed, and tomorrow is the 20th day for the ship Dartmouth. That makes this body of the people all mourning over.
Mr. Bruce just arrived. The governor's warrant is in.
The governor is willing to grant anything consistent with the laws and it is duty to the king, but orders that the vessels cannot leave unless the cargo is unloaded as the law demands. And what say you all to this? Our governor has refused to send this tea back to England. He has refused every petition, every course and recourse to an amicable solution. He is the one who's forced our hand. As the sun rises, customs officials will board these ships, forcibly unload the tea, and give it to those hand-picked royalist tea merchants, the consignees, while we shall be forced to pay this illegal tax, and any honest merchant refusing to sell this foul brew will be strangled by an East India Company monopoly. The time has come for the people of Boston to take matters into their own hands.
If you choose to participate in this brave action, there will be many dangers that we shall run. I'm sure that first and foremost on your minds are those 3 ships of war anchored not 500 yards away. Don't bother looking, it's dark and foggy. They are there, the Active, the Captain, and the Kingfisher, carrying more than 100 cannon between them. And they have orders from our esteemed Royal Governor Thomas Hutchinson to fire upon these vessels and possibly sink them should we try to leave the harbor with the tea. But to my understanding, my friends, that is not the plan. We are not taking this tea out of the harbor, we are rather putting it into the harbor. We shall have nothing to worry about their guns. They will not fire upon us here at Griffin's Wharf for fear of hitting the town. So that takes care of the nitty gritty. And 1, 2, 3, send it over the side!
Down below there are replica tea boxes, and you can see how the sailors would have lived. But here's Deborah the Revolutionist throwing the tea overboard.
Revolutionary, gotta bring it back out now.
He's arrested.
No one was
After a few
ever
days, he gets
arrested
drunk
and
and he
tried
starts
for the
speaking too much.
Boston Tea
However, no one else is willing to corroborate his story. I beg your pardon, it's a hard word to say. And so he's actually has to be let go due to a lack of evidence.
And now it's time for our harbor tour. We'll be going to the New England Aquarium tomorrow. There are many sights to see as we travel out into the harbor.
A four-story glass cube shaped in front of that, right at the water's edge, that four-story building, that's the Institute of Contemporary Art, completed in 2006. Back then, that was the tallest building in the entire Seaport District.
This is an artist's depiction of a cod on a fish warehouse.
Chimneys there, cut at a sharp angle.
Must be the
That building is one
airway.
of the two ventilation towers for the Ted Williams Tunnel that connects South Boston on our right with East Boston on our left.
As we are on our cruise, airplanes are constantly landing on Boston Logan International Airport, and we go right under the flight activity.
You can actually see on the decks above the rooftop of that 8-story building, that warehouse. Now, Logan Airport was the 16th busiest in the country 2 years ago. We had 41 million passengers come through our gates. And now, an airplane coming directly overhead. Logan Airport opened in 1926, and today it covers some 2,400 acres of man-made land. And it completely covered over 3 islands that used to be there in the waters. The first governor, Governor Winthrop, built a house over there.
Castle Island is on the mouth of the harbor and has had many different forts built here for protection. The current one is Fort Independence. It was built during the Civil War but never saw any action. The monument there is for Donald McKay, who ran a shipyard here and invented the clipper ship. There are many sailboats out on the harbor, and also some large freighters are coming in and out of the harbor. This is the wastewater treatment plant for Boston, and these are sludge tanks that are used to hold the sludge until it can be pumped out into the ocean.
So the first lighthouse on this side of the Atlantic was built right there in 1716. Now when the British left the city...
This life ship stood off of Nantucket when it was in active duty. This sailing ship was brought in here and made into an oyster bar, and this dock here becomes very active during the evening as they have all different kinds of parties and things going on there. This is the Morris J. Tubin Bridge and is used to get over to the other side off Boston. Saves about 30 minutes driving. And the Carson Young is a World War II Fletcher-class destroyer that you can tour here in the harbor. But the most famous ship here is Uss Constitution. Let's learn about it.
Now, just off to our right-hand side, here is the jewel of the harbor, the USS Constitution. She is the oldest commissioned warship afloat in the world. She was built right here in Boston in 1797. And she won her famous nickname over the War of 1812. It was there off the coast of Nova Scotia. The Constitution encountered the HMS Revere. That's a British warship. And in the brief battle that followed, British sailors saw some of their cannonballs bouncing off the hull of the Constitution. Huzzah! Shouted one. Her sides are made of iron. And that's how the nickname Old Ironsides was coined and remains associated to the ship to this day. But she's not made of iron, however. 21-inch thick Georgia live oak with a white oak on either side. A very unique structure. It was quite dense. Even after that battle, they found some 19 cannonballs embedded in her hull as well. Now the ship is still owned and operated by United States Navy. In fact, she is staffed by active duty Navy sailors. And to retain her status as a commissioned warship, she must travel at least 1 nautical mile every year. And she does so on July 4th, when she heads out to Fort Independence at Castle Island, and she sets Allen's 21-gun salute to Fort Independence there, before turning around and returning to her berth facing the other direction. And that way, the other side of her hull will wear evenly the course of the next year. And perhaps in that way, we'll be able to keep her afloat for another several hundred years.
And now it's time to get off of our harbor cruise, eat supper, and head back to our hotel for the night in South Boston, thus ending day 24 of our trip.